The Football Hipsters podcast is brought to you in association with 4elementswebdesign.co.uk. Loyal sponsors from this season, Kris and the crew have got you covered. Whether it's branding, web design, marketing or video production, or even SEO and strategy, they can help you out. Contact them at 4elementswebdesign.co.uk, or you can find them on Twitter. Kris and the crew will be happy to take your queries at 4elementsDES. We thank them for their continued sponsorship. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Football Hipsters podcast. You've all been very, very patient, and we appreciate and love you very, very much. Well, what was it, 2 weeks ago? I think I sat here in this very hosting chair and said to you that it was nearly the podcast that never was. Well, in that case, this is going to be the podcast that we're not sure ever could be, because it's a completely random thrown together show, because we didn't want to let you, the loyal listeners, down. I am your host, Kris, and tonight I have got three, potentially at some point, maybe even four hipsters with me. So I shall introduce them first of all. Making his return after a prolonged period of absence due to work. It's not John, I'm afraid. It's an upgrade. It's Joel. Hello, Joel.
Good evening, Kris.
Nice to have you back, my friend. Is it all going well in the world?
Yeah, best as ever, as it could be.
Good. Making the money. That's what it's all about in life, isn't it?
Dollar.
And we've also got our resident co-button monkey. He's your friend of mine. It's Mr. Josh Dorr. Hello, Josh.
Good evening, Kris. Long time no speak.
That's kind of a lie, Josh, and you know it. But
yes.
Yeah, we'll cover that in a second. But good to have you back again another night. And last but not least, for now, we will introduce our new member of the crew. You probably know her already, but if you don't, here she is. It's Miss Lana Durwood. Hello there, Lana.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm all good, thank you. This is like your second debut unofficially, really, isn't it? Because we had you with us last night, but it went a bit wonky. So welcome back.
Yeah, that was an addition. So
naturally. So for those of you who are wondering what the hell we're on about, we recorded our regular show just last night, tonight being Tuesday, the 26th September. And unfortunately, an unwitting audio problem meant that we recorded 2 hours of silence. We didn't think that would be very good for you guys and girls to listen to. So we're back to sort of try and go again. And as Josh brilliantly puts it in our chat box, it was a behind closed doors friendly podcast. So we're going to try and do something a little bit different tonight, just to make sure that you don't forget about us. We're going to do a listeners' questions special. If you haven't seen our tweets, then you wouldn't know that, but you will know it by now. Before we launch into the show, we do just want to say a little thank you at the start of the show and at the end of the show about our GoFundMe page. Seems rather ironic that we're asking for help after our colossal mistake last night. But if you want to give us a small amount of money to help keep the lights on, as the old saying goes, we would really appreciate it. We will be giving a shout out to those who have done already, and thank you to you all at the end of the show. But if you have a few pence to spare, whether it be £1, £10, £100, £6 million, whatever it is you've got, if you have it to spare and you like what we do, if you visit our GoFundMe page, I think it's GoFundMe/the FH podcast, you will find our link. It's all on the Twitter as well. We really, really appreciate your support. So we will give a shout out to those who have sponsored us or helped us out, should we say, at the end of tonight's pod. So let's rock and roll. Around about an hour or so's questions is the plan. So we're going to start with a question that came in actually while we were recording the mystery elusive pod from last night. And it comes from one of Joel's friends, actually. It's Harry Hainstock at H Hainstock. Good evening to you, Harry. He wants to know which is the best league in Europe and why. Now, this is a question that has divided members of our podcast throughout its conception all the way to today. And I'm sure it divides a lot of people's opinions in the world of football today. So let's get some thoughts then. Joel, do you want to make a case for La Liga? Because I have a feeling that's probably what you're going to say. So, what do you is that your answer first of all? And what's your kind of backup for?
Yeah, it is La Liga. I think to take the question, there's a different component to the question. I think as a product, the Premier League's probably the most developed in terms of the way it's marketed, the way they've sold the TV rights, the way it's distributed evenly, the way they've captured markets before others, such as now, we've seen the Chinese market open up. We'll probably see Facebook, Amazon, and the Premier League will take that first. So in terms of that, the Premier League in that sense is far and away ahead of other leagues. I think from a purely football perspective, in terms of the quality on the pitch, I would obviously say La Liga. The reason I say that is judging the success in Europe over the last 5 or 6 years that Spain have had in the Champions League and the Europa League as well. I think that's something which kind of you can't look past. I think the Premier League had that in probably 2005 onwards till about 2012, where they had a good success in European competitions. But I think Spain the last 3 or 4 years have certainly dominated it. I think the quality of the league is stronger than people think. I certainly feel that it's definitely improving. I think it will improve again when the money does get more evenly distributed, because that is an issue with Madrid and Barca taking the lion's share of TV revenue because they can negotiate themselves. Spain as a league is looking towards the Premier League to do a lot of things that the Premier League's done in terms of growing the league. They're just about 10 years behind. And that's, I'm not even saying that flippantly, I genuinely think they are doing everything they can to make it better. Purely football, I would 100% say La Liga. I think it's tactically the most developed league as well. I think teams are set up in a way which is difficult to play against because they're all possession based. So I think that's difficult to play against because they're all so comfortable on the ball and they don't just give you possession. So I would go for La Liga. I think, but to come back to the Premier League, I think as a product, the Premier League is far and away the best. There's one thing the Premier League that I always kind of come back to is people say anybody can beat anybody. But I think when you actually look at results, most weekends, they go the way you think they're going to go. I think last weekend was a good example of that. The big teams beat the smaller teams. You had Man City thrashed, Palace. I don't think there's any shock results. I think we read far too much in this country into the Premier League when there is a shock result, that this is the Premier League and this is why it's the best in the world. Not to forget, that Real Madrid did lose at home to Betis just last week. Barca have lost at home to smaller teams, gone away and lost. It does happen. I think it's just not picked up on as much. And the final thing with La Liga is people say it's a 2-horse race. But we've had Atletico Madrid win the league, and we've had them get to 2 Champions League finals in the last 3 years. So that proves there's depth within that league. And if we look at the Premier League, I heard on TalkSport today, they was talking about, well, only the 2 Manchester clubs or maybe Chelsea can win the Premier League. Well, that's practically the same as La Liga, I guess, then, that these 3 teams can win the league. So, yeah, I'll put my flag and firmly masted towards La Liga.
Good stuff. A good case for the outcome straight away, or for your defence, if you will. So I like that answer. Lana, have you got a case for any of the other big 4 leagues at all? Can you put an argument forward?
I think those who followed me in the past knows I have split views on this. I follow Juve because I support them, but my go-to league is obviously Ligue 1, mainly because I support France, but also because I think some of the best talent in the world comes from the French league. And it's just so fun to watch different teams, whether it's Nice, Lyon, Marseille, because they play different types of football, and they all have excellent players coming through their academy, and it's just a joy to watch a player grow to become so good that he's wanted by the best teams in the world. Personally, having watched the Lyon players from a young age and then go on to join big clubs such as Arsenal, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, I have a close affection to Ligue 1. So that's my favorite league. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best in terms of entertainment. I would probably say it's Spain. And also Premier League, it has a good shout, mostly because it's so unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. But my favorite league is obviously League One, and it's the best one ever also.
You won't get any arguments here. I think it's fair to say we both agree it's not the best league in the world, but for entertainment, it's our league of choice. So we'll give it that. So, Josh, can you make a case for maybe the Premier League against Joel's argument there? I mean, would you say that the Premier League is, as you said, like the richest and the most glamorous, if you will? Could you make that defence to say Premier League is still above La Liga? Because I'm struggling, I'll confess.
I would say if we looked back during the Fergie era of the Premier League, then I would say it would be the better league, because you had that period where you had at least 3 or 4 teams fighting on European fronts as well within the Champions League. That's now dropped significantly out. Perhaps this season we might see the likes with Jose and Pep with a couple of seasons behind them now, with their respective teams to push on in the Champions League. Conte is not really much of a cup manager, so I'm not sure how well Chelsea will do. Liverpool, from tonight's results, appear to be struggling in the Champions League, and Tottenham I don't think have properly been tested, but we'll have to see how they get on fundamentally with results at Wembley as well. But I think it is a league that has dropped in terms of its standards, but it's still got the attraction of getting the big players in. You know, we've had the likes of Zlatan drop into the league in the last couple of years. We can still attract the big names, but fundamentally, when this question came up, it's like Joel said, it depends what you want from your football. If you want the best technical game, I think you find that in Spain. If you want to find the best youth, you find that in Liga. If you want the best defensive kind of tactical game, you look to Italy. And then I think if you look for the most competitive, I think you actually go to the Championship, because especially this season, almost every team, it's almost harsh to say there are much of a muchness, but there isn't a big team down there this season. So there's no runaway winner that you can really see. And the teams down the bottom, there's a lot of smaller clubs as well. You'll get the kind of young English players coming through, especially in the last couple of years, where the Premier League has kind of stopped young English players really developing, and they've had to look into the lower leagues. So as someone who is English, likes to follow the English national team, that seeing young English talent develop is personally where I would I'd look to the Championship as being the most competitive league.
It's almost like the spirit of Ross was walking through the podcast then. But no, I do agree with that to a point. Do you want to come in on that one, Joel?
Yeah, just one more thing. I think what happens in England, it's a cultural thing with the way the fans want football to be played, that English fans predominantly want attacking football where it's exciting end to end, and possession-based football is not really welcome. So I think that does create more exciting football, because, you know, you've all been at a game when a player's gone backwards to keep possession. There's a groan around the crowd. People want them to go forward, which then creates a better product, which is probably why it does sell around the world, because you do get higher scoring games, because it's probably not as tactical and it's more about scoring goals and end-to-end football, as opposed to compare to Spain, which is a lot more tactical and possession-based. So I think that's more of a cultural thing, I think.
Yeah, I think the one thing that question really encapsulates from the 3 answers we've had there, and thank you to Harry for sending that one in. It basically says that ultimately the best league in the world is, there's so many different diverse areas you could cover, and there's so many different things you could cover. It's not just a question of what is the best league, it's what's the most entertaining, what's the best run, who's got the best players, what sort of best style, and it comes down to what you enjoy. And I think that's why the argument of what's the best in the world is so hard to judge. And if you particularly enjoy hurly-burly sort of football, then you're not going to enjoy possession-based leagues, and vice versa. So, you know, I think it's I think it's a really good question, and it is one we could talk on for hours, but we will move on to our next question, and thank you for that one, Harry. Now, we've had a few questions from some of our regular listeners, so there'll be a few repeat names here, but we will take our first one of many from our good friend Jimmy, who's at NN_Gooner. Big shout out to Jimmy as well, who sent us some fabulous pictures from the DC United game that he went to where they won 4-0 the other night. Jimmy was quite poorly at half-time, bless him, so I hope he's recovering now. But thanks to Jimmy for sending those in, and you'll be hearing more from Jimmy soon. More on that later on. But his question, or one of his first questions he has, was the top 5 or 10, if you can narrow it down, derbies in football. So what I'm going to do is just get a couple of quick-fire answers from you all. Lana, you've got a couple ready already. So you've gone with the Rome Derby, Istanbul Derby, and the Milan Derby. Which is your favourite of those 3? I've got a feeling I know the answer to this, but go on.
You can answer since you know the answer.
Is it the Rome Derby by any chance?
Yes.
Yes. Go on, explain why. And maybe explain who that is, of course, because some of our listeners won't know.
It's Saint-Étienne versus Lyon. It's, in my opinion, the fiercest derby in France. People would like to talk about Marseille, PSG, the Classique, but it's up there with also the Olympic Derby, which is Marseille and Lyon. But there's just something about watching 2 clubs from the same town coming together and just fight it out on the pitch. I mean, you guys have seen the North London Derby, you know how it feels. But it's such an underrated derby, and I feel like unless you watch the French league, you don't get why it's one of the best in Europe. But it's one that it's worth watching because it always ends up with tons of goals, lots of red cards, and a lot of fighting afterwards.
Yeah, the atmosphere is particularly intense in that one. I can vouch for that.
It's incredible. I went to my the last derby to be played at Stade de Gerland. Which was the Lyon Stadium before they moved to the new one. And that's the game where Lacazette scored the hat-trick.
Oh, God bless him.
Yeah, then Umtiti was carried out because he got injured and came on after the game with crutches, starting to fight the Saint-Étienne players. So,
as you do.
Yeah, good entertainment.
Yes, I can vouch for that 100%. And the other two you bring up there, the Istanbul Derby, we saw a game with, was it 5 red cards at the weekend in Turkey between Besiktas and Fenerbahce, I think, from memory. So that kind of covers that to a degree. It's definitely a way of highlighting. And Turkish football has always had bitter rivalries. Milan Derby is an obvious one. Josh, have you had any? You've just brought one up there, the Lisbon Derby, Porto and Benfica.
No.
Of course. No,
Benfica and Sporting.
Sorry. Yeah. Porto and Benfica is a whole other story, isn't it? So you've seen a few Lisbon derbies in your time, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Well, my Portuguese team is Sporting. There's a lot that's gone on in this game in general, but in terms of how close this game is, I think Benfica have taken a lot of plaudits in recent times for how they've done in, say, the Champions League as well. But there's a lot of underlying stories in this, and it's absolutely mad in terms of the support for it as well. You've got managers that have jumped across between the two teams to then go and defeat the teams with inferior squads, and just the players that are involved as well. It's a kind of sporting hotbed for those kind of Spanish style or South American players that will come through from those respective youth academies. But for me, that's one of the most exciting for me to watch, and I always try and catch it every year when it's on.
Yeah, it is a go. It's not Yeovil Town, Taunton Town, but yeah, I'm with you. No, it is a cracker of a derby. I think I'll bring Joel in a second. There's just a couple that come to mind for me. The Super Classico between Boca Juniors and River Plate. That's always a nasty game in Argentina. The Glasgow Derby. Actually, I think Joel's just brought that up now. Joel, you want to make a case for the defence as far as El Clasico goes, because it's technically not a derby, but it is still kind of a derby, isn't it? It's that kind of weird one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a Spain and Catalonia thing, I think. So, I don't know if it's not a derby, but it's absolutely intense. I think we have to step back to what the definition of a derby is actually. But yeah, I would say the Madrid derby is intense, but I think the most intense would probably be the Glasgow derby, just because I think that slightly crosses a boundary of football and other things, which I just feel like that when you watch those games, all the quality is abysmal at the minute with the two teams where they're at, but the atmosphere is unbelievable, and they are kind of games that you always watch. So I would say the Glasgow derby is quite intense in terms of that.
Yeah, I watched that one at the weekend, I must admit, over Spurs West Ham. I wanted to see the Glasgow derby, as you say, even if the quality between the sides is very evident in Celtic's favour.
League One at the minute, that's standard of football. Not much better than that. Not to offend anyone.
I was going to say, our poor Scottish listeners are turning off in their droves, but no, I think even they'd probably agree with that sentiment. And there's a few others that Josh put in there. Obviously, the Liverpool and Manchester derbies, so Manchester City and United. That's probably going to be a very keenly fought one this season, in particular. I think with the two sides, Newcastle, Sunderland, obviously Arsenal, Spurs, as Lana's mentioned there. As we said, Liverpool, Everton. I'm trying to think of Turin derby, as Lana's just put there, the Juventus-Torino game, which was, of course, 4-0 at the weekend to Juve. That's quite a bitter rivalry. There's a few sort of understated ones, isn't there, as well? Go on, Josh.
Well, I was going to say you've got Liverpool v Manchester United as the derby. That one's huge for old school Premier League and English football. That's a big old derby. There are some odd ones in there that seem to have got a lot of visceral behind them. I'm thinking of the Brighton Palace derby that we're going to get this season. It's got no real reason to actually exist as a derby. It's a spat between two managers who are ex teammates at Spurs that fell out, and that's really where the derby has been created from, because although there's about 30 miles between the two teams, it's not really enough to generate a derby. But that's one that has kind of come out of nothing, because it's not even some derbies are created out of not just location, but the team's standings. That's where the Liverpool Manchester one kind of covers both. It's quite a competitive derby, two big rivals at the top of the league, and geography then is second in that derby.
And you've got ones like MK Dons Wimbledon, where there's just bitter sort of feeling between clubs, and they're not even in the same areas. But because of the politics that's gone on between those two clubs, that's almost classed as a derby, I would guess now. And like Joel says, I guess it depends what you class as a derby, and where you are watching your football. Even international derbies, think of some of the games in sort of the old Soviet Union, teams clashing, that sort of thing. There's a lot going on there. USA, Mexico, that's always a big rivalry, which I'm sure Jimmy will be well aware of. So, yeah, plenty of derbies there. If there's one that you think we've missed out, I mean, there's hundreds, but if there's one you want to bring to our attention, then please let us know. Let's move on to our next question. This one comes in from one of our regular fans, our regular sort of contributors, that's the word. It's our good friend Pete Kennelly over in lovely Australia. Josh, I'm going to give this one to you, and I might get Joel's thoughts from a championship perspective as well. He wants to know, can Sheffield United keep going to the Premier League, and why does Chris Wilder fly under the managerial radar? If you want to take the second part of that, and then I'll get Joel's opinion on Sheffield United as a club, given the way they've started.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of managers that are in the lower leagues that are kind of scooted over when it comes to looking at the talent for managers, especially when there's vacancies in the Premier League. You'll generally look to go abroad. I know it's a bit of a Paul Merson thing to say, but there is talent in the lower leagues for especially managerially. And that's where Chris Wilder, I think, has gone under it. I'd look at him a little bit like Eddie Howe, that, come back to a club. He's done very, very well. He's done very well for them. And I think overall, he will get the recognition I think once he gets into the limelight a bit more, but at the moment, Sheffield United are under the radar.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Your gremlins are just popping back then, but I think you've made some good points, especially the idea how comparisons. So what about Sheffield United then, Joel? Obviously, you've seen a little bit of Championship football over the years, and having a look at Hull sort of on the odd occasions as well. What do you make of Sheffield United? They were hugely impressive at the weekend in the Sheffield Derby and really put Wednesday to the sword. And they've got a manager there, as Josh has said, in Chris Wilder, who's deeply passionate for the club, but also he seems to know what he's doing, doesn't he? So it plays some really good stuff.
Yeah, I think that they're certainly going to be around it. I think a couple of reasons. One, they should be, for the size of the club and the support base they've got and the setup and the facilities they've got. They are one of those clubs that are in between the Premier League and the Championship where you think they should probably be. I think the Wilder thing is big. He's practically been successful everywhere he's been. And I see that continuing with Sheffield United. They seem to have good options as well when you look at the squad. It was really impressive at the weekend. And you think, well, they've got an opportunity now to push on where they're quickly, and we've seen this before with teams, Norwich, Southampton, who've gone League One to the Premier League and done it in consecutive seasons. So I don't see why Sheffield United can't do that. That said, it is such a competitive league and they will have a dip at some point. But I think they'll be there or thereabouts, and I think that's largely due to Chris Wilder. He will either, I think, take Sheffield United into the Premier League or be in the Premier League himself next season.
I think you're quite right there. He's got a whiff of sort of Sean Dyche about him, hasn't he? And even if he doesn't take the club he's got, then he should be considered for a big job. If, of course, it continues, because, of course, we are early on in the season. But, fair play to him and full credit to what he's done in the job. Next one, this is probably another one for Josh, this one. This comes from Pat Ormsby, who of course recorded the MLS pod with myself and Jimmy back in the day. So thank you, Pat, for this one. Biggest surprise in the EFL this season? Biggest disappointment this season in the EFL as well, he wants to know. Can be a manager, team or player. You got any thoughts on this one, Josh?
Yes, I was just double checking what their result was this evening before I went all on the Shrewsbury Town. Oh, I put my teeth in. Shrewsbury Town train for the biggest surprise in the AFL. Nearly got relegated towards the end of last season, and they've gone basically full Leicester in League One. They are still unbeaten in the league after 10 games. 26 points, top of the league of League One. No one really saw this coming, to be honest. They just beaten Doncaster this evening 2-1 with a 94th minute winner. I think for me, they're the biggest surprise this season. Also a shout out for Cardiff City as well, near the top of the Championship. They'd be the two I'd look at. Biggest disappointment, I would say, is probably it's between Birmingham and Sunderland. It's not a very nice sandwich to be in terms of teams. I'm not really sure what's going on with either of those clubs at the moment. Probably say Birmingham are the bigger disappointment, because we knew that Sunderland would be, there was either a chance they'd be high flying or right at the bottom. They weren't going to be mid-table at this start of the season. But the fact that Birmingham have already got rid of Harry Redknapp and spent so much money in the summer window that, for their position at the moment, just doesn't make any sense. So I'd go Birmingham City.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with you on that one, to be fair. And another good question that from Pat. So thank you very much, Pat. Hopefully that answers that one for you. The next one is for you, Lana, based on your Serie A knowledge and the bits and bobs you've watched from that league. Comes again from Pete Cannelly in Australia. Why don't you think Dries Mertens has ever been linked with a move to one of the big boys? Now, I think he was briefly linked with Manchester United, I think, wasn't he, a couple of seasons ago? But he's kind of been reinvigorated or re-energized in this striker role, and he's now getting the plaudits that he probably deserves. I think he got another goal for Napoli tonight in the Champions League. What do you think is it that's put off the big boys, if you don't call Napoli a big boy, that is?
I think that the reason he probably has been linked away. But the reason he stayed was most likely because of the Higuain sale. Then also Milik getting the serious injury, and he was more assumed into more of a leader role, taking Napoli forward. And I believe that they entrusted him with this, having sold their top scorer. And he's been excellent for Napoli, scoring goals, hat tricks, and he was also, I think, named Belgian Player of the Year last season.
I think you might be right, actually. Yeah,
ahead of Hazard and Nainggolan, which also had a great season. But the thing is, most of these players who come to Italy, they're not Italian, but they get that sense of loyalty, which you're not used to seeing in other leagues. So it's easier for them to reject offers from abroad and to stay and get that almost like this cult hero status, which most of the Italian players get. The likes of, Del Piero, Maldini, you saw Zanetti getting it, even if he wasn't Italian. And I also think that he might be one of these that could potentially stay at Napoli for a long time. Obviously, if a big offer comes in and the club won't refuse it, he'll go. But I think that he is so well loved and really enjoys his football with Napoli. And they play great football. And who knows, they might fight for the Scudetto, but they might go far in the Champions League as well. But why would you want to leave a club where you're safe, you're loved, you're doing great, to potentially go to another club where you don't know how it will end up? And I think a lot of players, seeing how other players move too soon, it doesn't always pan out as they expect. Other players watch and they realize the grass isn't always green on the other side, as many would like to think it is.
And of course, he's got the opportunity now with Milik's and very unfortunate second ACL tear. He's now going to get more and more games for Napoli. So
horrible news for Napoli. It was a big blow.
And they couldn't even get the celebration right in the goal tonight, where they got the wrong. Did you see this? This game tonight at Napoli, they won 3-0 against Feyenoord, and Lorenzo Insigne scored the opener, and he went to celebrate it by holding up a Milik shirt. The only small problem is he was handed a Zielinski shirt instead. It was all rather awkward. They got there in the end, but was a little bit awkward. Anywho, good question, that one from Pete. Thank you, Pete. And this next one is for you, Joel, I think, and it's from Pete again, actually. And he wants to know, if the Manchester Derby was played today, who wins? So given the fact that they've both been on good form this season, who do you think wins?
It's a draw, because Di Mourinho would get his classic draw against the top 4 teams. So no, I seriously think it would be... Where's it at?
All right, just to be annoying, neutral venue.
All right, okay, Wembley. I would go for Man City, because I feel, although the goal difference is slightly better in Man City's favour, goals for, they've both conceded 2. I always go with the basis that a team like Man City, the way they're set up now under Pep this second season, can probably outscore a team, and they'll definitely score against most teams. I think what we're now seeing with Man City, which is really important, is him defending with the ball. And this was something he did at Barcelona a lot. When you look at his really successful season at Barcelona, they would only concede maybe 11 or 12 goals a season, which is comparable to a really defensive coach, but that's because he defends with the ball. I certainly believe that today, if there was to play today, a neutral venue, Man City would be United, although you'd have one manager desperately going for it to win and to entertain. You'd have another manager who would be happy to sit in and be pragmatic through the game and look for a draw, or look for something on a counter-attack or a set piece. But yeah, I'd hang my hat on Man City. I just think they're in a bit better form in terms of scoring goals, which is so important.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that, actually. I think Man City at the moment, and Josh, they're going to be playing on the 9th of December, and it's at Old Trafford, so no pressure. Stick your head on the block right now on the 26th of September. Who wins that fixture?
Me?
Yes.
Sorry. At the moment, I go Man City because I think as much as I think Man United will just completely shut up shop, I don't think they've got all of the players that they would like for that game. But we know that Jose versus Pep is a derby in itself. Perhaps we could use that for the earlier question for a managerial derby.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Yeah.
I think overall, I think it would be City just because I could see them getting a goal, or at least one more than United could muster.
They're well set up away from home with this counter-attacking style as well, aren't they? So, yeah, I kind of, at the risk of being a nodding dog, I think I'm kind of with you both on that one for Man City for that fixture. So we shall see. We'll, of course, cover it if we learn how to press record by December. Moving on to our next question. This one's from Arian, our good friend Arian H, 1999. Christ, that makes me feel old. He wants to ask, if you were to take one player from your prospective clubs from each of these leagues, who shall they be? Now, I think if I'm reading that right, I think he's saying from our favourite clubs of each league. Is that how you guys read this question? I think that's what he's asking. So let's extend it. I'll extend it to 3 players from 3 different clubs from your leagues, just to make it slightly different. So I'll give Joel obviously La Liga. I'll give you Serie A, Lana, if you don't mind, and I'll give Josh a choice of Bundesliga or England. So you got a choice there, Josh, and then we'll try and fudge France between us. So, Lana, who would you take the 3 players from 3 clubs in Italy that you would take for your sort of team if you're building one?
I can only take 3. It has to be from Serie A.
Yep. I might, if I'm feeling generous, I might give you 3 French players as well. But you can do Italy first.
Why can't you just say French players? It's so much easier.
Because that would kill Arian's question. You see, we have to go with the listener's question.
Damn it! I was gonna go with Umtiti, Tolisso, and Lacazette. So.
What a combination that is. See, I could be even worse, and I could say to you they've all got to be Juve players. Shall I be even more mean, or does that make it easier for you?
Yeah, but I can't take Juve players out of Juve to put them back in Juve.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. So, yeah, in that case, then you're lumbered. So you have to pick the 3 players from Serie A that you would take to start your prospective team.
Okay. Icardi.
Interesting.
Although I will probably... Yeah, I need to get rid of that fat ass Higuain.
Well, he's already eating somewhere in a bar, so he's fine. He's gone. That's fine.
He's at McDonald's with Big Mac. Yeah, Icardi. Nainggolan.
Yeah, can't disagree there.
And let's see who the third one should be. Probably Insigne, Lorenzo Insigne from Napoli.
Interesting. Okay, so not gonna take any defensive players. That's interesting. That's interesting.
I already have a great defense in Juve.
I see. So you're just taking the 3 to add to Juve. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay. Joel, who are you taking, I suppose, to add to Barcelona then, if we're going to do the question that way? So
to put in Barcelona's team from yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're sort of changing the question as we're going here, Arian. I'm sorry, we're butchering the question.
You wouldn't let me take French players.
True. Yeah, true.
I would say Toni Kroos and put in Barca's team. I would take... I think of a new player. I'd take Griezmann to put in Barca's team.
Good
and
choice.
I would take... I'm struggling for the last one. Oh God, I would. I don't want to do another Real Madrid player because that sounds really bad.
Take Ben Yedder.
Who, Lana?
Ben Yedder. He scored a hat-trick tonight.
No.
You guys need goals.
Yeah, I was trying to go. No, I'd go Koke from Atletico Madrid. I'd have to.
Yeah, that's hard Hard to say otherwise. He's a quality player, isn't he? So, okay, that's those two done then. Josh, I'll tell you what, we'll team up for Bundesliga, and then you can have England. So, we'll have. Should we have two each, just to break the rules?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so I'll have I'll make it easy for you. You can have the two attacking players, and I'll take two defensive players. So, and they're going to play for the Mighty Eagles of Eintracht Frankfurt. By the way, I get to choose the team, or Freiburg, whichever you prefer. I'm gonna have. I haven't planned this very well, have I? Defensive.
Do you want me to go first?
Go on then. Yeah.
Thiago Alcantara.
Oh, that was one
He's
of mine.
going
So,
in.
Yeah.
He's going straight into any team.
Yeah.
What a fantastic player he is.
Yeah. With you on that one.
Have
you got another one?
Yes. I'm going to go a bit left field. Christian Pulisic.
Oh, you have my other one as well, you git. Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. They are both quality players. But Pulisic is just, he looks a player, doesn't he? He really, really looks a player. I'm really struggling defensively, so I'm going to bottle this. And I'm not going to get a defensive player. My first one is Emil Forsberg.
Yes.
From RB Leipzig, who is just a joy to watch. A lot of Arsenal fans say to me, we need to replace Santi Cazorla. Well, there's your player. I know he's a slightly different player, but he's so good. He's so good. So I take him. I have found a defender I like, actually, Jonathan Tah. I think he's the one I'm probably going to take from Bayer Leverkusen. It's close between him and Niklas Süle, though, at Bayern, who was at Hoffenheim. I think he's a really, really good young defender at 22, but I'm going to just edge it and say Jonathan Tah at Leverkusen. So there's
really,
our...
Kris? Really?
I know you want me to say Tolisso. I know, but it's too obvious, isn't it? We have to be, slightly different here. But yes, of course, Tolisso. And imagine that midfield of Tolisso and Pulisic. I mean, that's just wow. With Thiago just behind. Oh, goodness me. Josh, take me away from this excitement and give me some English players. So you're taking, just to make it different, you're putting these into Brighton's team.
Oh, God, okay. I'll have a striker, please, because they're all suspended or injured as of last night.
Yeah.
So a striker, I would have... I'm going to go with Romelu, because we need to beat the lower teams, and the teams that Romelu scores against generally are the teams lower down the league.
You did that just to be happy, didn't you?
Well, yes and no, but we've got so many strikers that are available, and I don't want to take Lacazette out of Arsenal because I'm selfish.
Yeah.
In the midfield, no, I did have Kevin De Bruyne, but because we're going to put him into Brighton, I'm going to go with Fernandinho to replace Dale Stephens, because I just think he's such a fantastic player. Defensively, and can just play the ball out as well. Final player, he's only just gone, but could I have Kolasinac at left back?
Yeah,
because he'd absolutely destroy everybody. He's a tank. He's only been in the Premier League for a couple of games, and I know Sutton's done very, very well, but I wouldn't upgrade the wingers, so it's going to have to be Kolasinac at left back.
Fair enough. It's your choice. So you can have him. That's not a problem. And finally, for a French side, Lana, you can help me out here. Two players you can put into Lyon for obvious reasons. Two players from Liga. Anybody you fancy this season? I've got two. I can give you. So you give me two.
Malang Sarr.
Okay, that wasn't one of mine, but I thought about him. So good shout.
We need a good defense. Have you seen our crap defenses?
Well, I was going to offer you Christophe Julien, so...
No, thank you.
Okay, tough. He's in.
And striker, because we need to replace Depay with Alessandro Play. We need to get him back to Lyon. Yes.
Yeah, that's a good shout. See, I would have said Luis Stioni, but obviously he's just gone to St Etienne. But
we don't poach from the rivals.
No.
They might get infected.
This is true. Yeah, I can go along with that. The only other one I would add.
No PG players.
No, of course not. I would have said Jan Karamo, but obviously he went to Inter. Who else has impressed me this season? Can we take? I was just going to say, can we take Malcolm from Bordeaux? So you read my mind there. He's not a bad shout. Yeah, I think we'll go with those. I think we're happy with those. So there you go, Ariane. We've sort of fudged our way through your question there. Sorry about that. But we have got another question from Ariane, which I know Lana will be absolutely delighted to answer, which I'm not even going to type up. I'm just going to ask her. He says, question for me, but I'm going to bat it away. Since Zlatan is your favourite player, why do you think he failed at Barca? So I'm going to ask you first, Lana. And then I'm going to ask Joel, because I don't think you're going to agree that he failed. And I'm going to see if Joel can make a case for the defence that he did. So what is it about Zlatan that you love, and why do you think he failed at Barca?
I don't think he failed at... Oh, did you ask me or Joel?
No. You start, and then I'll get Joel to make a defence.
I don't think he failed. If you look at his numbers, he did really well. Obviously could have done better, but I also think that he didn't fit in to the team. He's not a type of player that Barcelona, he wouldn't fit in there. I don't think he would fit in at Madrid either. I think if he were to go to a Spanish team, Atletico Madrid would be the perfect team for him, because they play a type of style of play that suits him much better, while Barcelona is more of small people, small players, and, quick. And he's not necessarily a quick player, and the ball moves fast, and he's not someone who always, can keep up with the pace. And also because, his fallout with Guardiola, as he talks about in his book, his documentary. And I do think he got along well with Messi. It's evident even afterwards. He always talks highly of Messi, so I don't think there was any issues there. But I think his main issue was with Guardiola and the fact I just don't think he fit into Barcelona.
That's a very fair, balanced argument then. So, Joel, would you? I mean, feel free if you think he didn't fail, then feel free to say that. But if you feel that he didn't give, well, what was your kind of opinion on him when he was at Barca when you were watching him?
No, I do agree with Lana a lot of what she said there. I think it's hard to label him a failure because his numbers are really good. He scored important goals. He fitted into the team. I think the only way you could say he did fail in that kind of era and that team was a team, and although they had absolute superstars, Messi's an exception. I always take him out of it in terms of he gets to do what he wants, but you had people like Xavi, like Iniesta, like David Villa, who completely sacrificed themselves for the team and became complete team players. And I think we kind of know now that Zlatan wasn't willing to do what Pep needed him to do regularly on and off the pitch, which resulted in him being sold. So I think from an attitude perspective, he was kind of a failure because he didn't kind of toe the line to what was needed. My only bit back on that is Barca knew what they were signing. His character at that point wasn't a surprise. He's not as if he turned at Barca and developed an ego. That ego was there since practically day one. So I don't think, in kind of due diligence perspective from Barca, it's not a surprise that he didn't adhere to certain things that Pep wanted him to do, because he didn't ever done that. He's never done that in his career. So, I don't think it's right to label it. And I think he was unfortunate that in that time he was at Barcelona, it became evident that Messi needed to play down the middle and Guardiola wanted to play him down the middle. So someone had to miss out. The emergence of Pedro didn't help him either, because it became clear if you play Villa left, you play Pedro right, and Messi can go down the middle, then you've got a phenomenal front three, and you don't particularly need Zlatan to be in and around that. So, I feel like that kind of was where he was at. But it's difficult to label him a failure, I think, at Barca.
Speaking of his attitude, I agree with you on that, but it's also worth adding that when he left to join Milan, he had his second son, which also made him, he changed a lot. He also says so in an interview with a really famous Swedish reporter, that becoming a father really changed him and his perspective on life. And you also notice that when there's interviews with these younger players, such as at Milan, at PSG, that he was more included. He became more of a team leader when he joined Milan, going back to Italy after his time in Spain, that he became more team player. He brought up the best in Robinho, Pato. They all ended up with 16, 17, 18 goals each that season, then went on to PSG and was amazing there as well. So I think as much as people would love to label his time at Barcelona as a failure, it wasn't, but it also taught him a hard lesson in, both in life and also football-wise. And he took that with him to his next club, and I think it helped him change and become more involving and more of a team player than he was before.
Yeah, and as you rightly say, things change. Footballers, they're all an ego on the surface, but underneath they are still genuine, sort of genuine players of genuine human beings is probably the best way of putting it. They all have things going on in their lives. Things change players, and as Arian quite rightly points out, I do love Zlatan, and I always will, which is weird because I generally hate arrogant footballers, but he's just on another level. So yes, thank you, Arian. He is. He's a wonderful, wonderful man, even though he's at Man United. The next two questions are both Italy-based. So I'm going to give one to Josh and one to Lana. Give this one to you, Josh, because I think you've probably got enough knowledge to answer this. What do you put? This is from Alexi at Scruffkin. What do you put Milan's early struggles down to? So many new faces in town, or does Montella have cause for worry? I'm going to ask you this question because our very own Ross placed something in our group tonight, didn't he? About Vincenzo Montella, who I believe has parted company with his fitness coach or his physical coach tonight on Twitter publicly. So that, I guess, suggests that he doesn't feel that he's the problem. So do you think he's the problem? Or is it just the amount of players brought in? 175 million quid's worth in the summer, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter. They say you got rid of his physical preparation coach. So perhaps the standard of players he was getting up to, the standard of fitness that the players were getting up to through pre-season wasn't at the level that he expected. Milan have always had a very strong medical department as well. So there's obviously very high standards at the club to perform on that part of the aspect of the game. But overall, with Montella, as you say, there's an absolute shed load of players that came in. It's almost a brand new squad that they've assembled. And I think it is just the teething problems there. I think I said at the beginning of the season that if Milan could get this team could gel quickly, they would definitely be on for a second place finish, certainly in the league. And I think at the moment, with the way that Napoli have started, that looks like it's probably out of reach even now in the early stages. But I think, it is just the case of so many players coming in and just Montella having to try and bring them all in and work out what he's actually got with his squad to basically build it. So I'd expect to see after the winter break, wouldn't expect them to bring in any more players. Depends on the Cavani situation, I suppose, at PSG. But otherwise, I think that's the kind of time where he'll be able to get really down with the players and sort out what they need to do and find the right formation for them.
Yeah, it's certainly a period of transition and not going the way I think more people expected Inter to be where Milan are, and vice versa at this stage of the season. It's gone all a little bit wonky so far. This quote from Montella, I'll just read it to our listeners. It's quite amusing. So he's tweeted from his official account tonight: "Bounce back, AC Milan. I have thought long on how to step up. Let's start with physical preparation." And then he puts the following statement: "After careful consideration, I've made my decisions, and I consider physical preparation to be among the areas where improvements can be made. I have decided to start a new physical preparation plan for which I haven't found full agreement with my assistant, the athletic trainer, Emmanuel Mara. It is with a heavy heart that together with Emmanuel we have decided to part ways. I take this opportunity to thank him for the work we've done together over these years. I mean, if that doesn't bring a tear to your eye, nothing will. So there you go. Mara is no more Milan. Thank you for the public acknowledgement, Vincenzo. Leading on to that question, this one's for you, Lana. Right up your street from Chris Nielsen at Chris Nielsen 4. Will Juve defend their title this year, or can Napoli or even Inter realistically win it? I think I know your answer, but give us your version of events on that one.
Lord, Inter.
Don't start.
It was a good one. I mean, I would have understood if it's Roma, but Inter.
Oh, don't you dare. We're better than Roma this season, you know it.
No, but I mean, obviously, winning the title is always fun. I would gladly sacrifice it to win the Champions League. Please, I don't know if any Juve fans are listening to this podcast. I do think we're gonna win the title again. Obviously, we're gonna have a much tougher opposition this season. Teams have strengthened and become stronger. Some still have that battling mentality, such as Inter and Milan, but hopefully that will outgrow them. But I do think that Napoli is our main competition for the title. They look the most impressive, both in the Champions League and in the league. Roma might be a close second to compete for the title. I hope that Inter do well, obviously because I want the league to do well in terms of coefficient points, and competing in the Champions League means more money for the league as well. But I do think that we're going to win the league. Probably it won't be decided until like the last few remaining rounds. But I don't know, maybe if we lose, that would be a depressing year. But yeah. I think that we'll go for a 7th consecutive title. Should be fun.
Interesting. Okay. I just want to bring Joel in quickly on this one as well, Joel. When you watched Barcelona play Juventus last season in the Champions League, did you get the impression that Juve were a club that could kick on this season and potentially go one step further, or did you feel like it was a bit more of a kind of a rebuild? Because they have rebuilt the squad a lot this summer with new players coming in. So what do you sort of make of them this season, or indeed Napoli, if you've seen anything of them this season?
I think with to come to Juve, I think they've kind of been there. I think it was a Champions League final 2015 and obviously 17. So, yeah, I think I said on one of the pods back in the last season, I fancied them to win the Champions League after they beat Barca. I just thought they had that kind of, the team was, the characters they've got, with Bonucci and Chiellini and Buffon. I just thought it was made for them to win it. Obviously, they've had a restructure and a rebuild in the summer and have lost some key players, Alves and Bonucci in particular. They'll still be strong. I still think they'll be definitely last 4 again. It's just a very hard competition to win, isn't it? I know Madrid have found it very easy to win recently, but I think it is such a tough competition. And I think you definitely put your money on Juve being there again. However, they didn't look the same team when they played Barca earlier this season. It was 3-0 in the first game of the Champions League. And admittedly, they were missing a number of players, but I don't know. They didn't normally look so resilient in that game. They didn't look resilient at all. They looked like Barcelona could cut them open at will, and that's not what you expect from a Juve team. But I haven't seen that much of them to say, oh no, they've completely changed the style, or they don't look resilient because they've lost Bonucci. It could have just been that game. But I would think they'd be latter stage of the Champions League for sure, and probably win Serie A as well. And in terms of Napoli, I think outside of the teams that I like to watch, they would be a team that I'd 100% paid to watch due to the style of football that they play. I saw them in that cup, the pre-season cup. I can't think what it's called. Bayern Munich are in it, and Liverpool are in it.
Oh, the Audi. Is it the Audi Trophy? Yeah.
The one. They were far and away the best team there in terms of the football they played. Complete possession from the back, but possession with a purpose as well, and they moved through the lines quickly. Just looked like a fantastic team, and I think they'll do well this season as well again. And again, just fall into that category of winning, but also winning in style as well, which it seemed to be lost, I think, in a results-driven business as it is now. And they seem to be committed to playing, attacking football with a bit of style.
Yeah, I'm going full rogue, and I've said Napoli from the start of the season, and I'm going to stick with it, much to Lana's chagrin. But
That's fine.
I can't change my mind halfway through.
Just don't come crying to me when Gigi Buffon lifts that trophy for the 7th time.
Oh no, I'll come crying to you when Inter inevitably fall away in January. It'll be fine. So it's just, no, I just think I agree with a lot of what Joel said there as well about Napoli. They really are good to watch, and Sarri is one of the coaches I think to keep an eye on in the future. So yeah,
I do agree with you, Joel, on the game against you guys. I don't think necessarily it was because Bonucci was missing. It was more that we lacked that final puzzle in midfield. And it was so easy to just overrun our midfield. And the fact that we have a fat ass up front who does nothing besides eat, you basically play with 10 men. Well, 9 because Matuidi doesn't count either. So, but you guys were impressive. And we have a tendency to start slow in the Champions League. So hopefully that will, we will pick up and go forward. That remains to be seen tomorrow, obviously. But as I said, we go 4 steps forward and then we go 8 back because we always miss that one final piece to be a complete team. And it's so frustrating because as good as we are at signing 3 signings, such as Pirlo, Khedira, Pogba, we always miss that final link. And I don't know if you guys saw the derby at the weekend, that attack, when it clicks, it's going to be amazing. But I still have major doubts over our midfield. I'm not worried about our defense because we have options there with, Benatia, Chiellini, Barzagli, Rugani, Lichtsteiner, and that's no issue. But my main issue is that midfield with just having Khedira, Marquisio, and unfortunately plays Matuidi.
He plays alone.
My heart aches every time I think about the fact that we bought him instead of Tolisso. I genuinely want to cry. I had my shirt ready. I'm not joking.
That doesn't surprise me.
I was going to buy it from a Chinese factory, be like Juve and then Tolisso with the number and all. Your
dreams were cruelly crushed. But yeah. Hey, at least you still get to watch him. That's the most important thing. But
yeah, I'm a Bayern fan now.
Oh, naturally. Yeah. Follow the player, not the club. I agree. This is we got a couple of good questions here. We got a couple left, and there's a couple here that are easy to whip through. This one's from Dylan Weldon, and it's a very good question, actually. So I'll give you all a quick answer on this one if you can. He says, should players who dive in games be punished more than at the moment? Now, we've got a question on VAR coming up, so I'll save that for that question. But just on that question, it's at Dylan Weldon 4, by the way. Thank you, Dylan. What do we all think? Josh, what do you think about diving? What's your kind of views on it?
So we've had in the Premier League this season the new rules come in for retrospective banning for diving, which we haven't actually seen enforced yet. Which I think once we see, a proper incident occur this season, then we'll really be able to tell whether or not it's actually working. But at the moment, I don't think we've really had any high-profile dives, contrary to what Tony Pulis said yesterday evening. But I'm not really sure what we can do at the moment until we get more examples, because the Premier League have tried to tackle this issue, if you pardon the pun. It's just a case of waiting for an incident to occur. So whether or not, because of this retrospective ban that we've seen in the first 6 rounds of fixtures, we haven't seen any diving occur as regularly as we did last season. But I think it's a case of see what it's like across the rest of the season, get a couple of incidents to actually happen, if they end up happening, to really call it whether or not the retrospective or the threat of retrospective action really come into play.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation with diving, because I think the Liverpool-Leicester game at the weekend, the 3-2 game, I think both free kicks that resulted in goals were probably dives, incidentally. So that's a good one. Joel, from your perspective, there is, in the La Liga games I've watched, there is a little bit of overacting at times. Funny enough, Neymar was one of the worst for it before he went for pastures new in the summer. But has things changed this season, and our referees starting to get hot on it? Because we had the handball rule, didn't we, in La Liga, which recently went out.
Yeah.
But has the diving, have referees clamped down on it more? And do you think that these players that are caught, or are done, is a booking in a game enough, or should there be even further more punishment, whether it be retroactive or on the pitch for straight red, for example?
Yeah, I think as it being clamped down on, I'd say no, not that. Not watched any game and thought, well, that would have, been not punished last season. It is now. I think the diving thing, I think it's a really fine line between being clever and buying fouls and diving. I think some are really blatant and just ridiculous. But I do think some are kind of gamesmanship and exist within the game. And if somebody's silly enough to dangle a leg or, commit to a tackle and they're not kind of in the best position to, and a player can buy a foul. I think what's really important is the way that I've spoken to people in Spain about this. They see yellow card as a really important factor in a game, because it then affects the player's decision making completely. Who's on a yellow card, because he can't dangle a leg, he can't make a tackle, he can't take any chance. So there was the incident with Messi in the Champions League against Juve when he got booked for asking for a yellow card. That because it's so important. So if a player can buy a yellow card on a player, they will do it. I don't think it's something that as English supporters, from England, I think it's alien to us. But I think on the continent, particularly South American players, they'll do anything to gain advantage, and I don't think they see it particularly as cheating. They just see it as part of the game. So I think we're not going to see the end of it. I don't think we ever will. And I hate to think that it's encouraged, but I actually think it probably is. In the box, if you feel contact. I think the strange thing I always find is you can see players shout, or you see, we've done it ourselves, that's a yellow card or something to a referee, and that's acceptable. But if you wave an imaginary yellow card, you're seen as one of the worst people in football, trying to get other people booked. But I think that's just the game. So I don't know with the diving thing. I think it's a fine. I don't even know if VAR will improve the diving element as well, because surely there's an element of subjectivity to it as well. That's why I'm sceptical of VAR. I know I'm going to come on to that.
Yeah, we will segue into that. And as Josh has said there, apparently Maurizio Pochettino said he actively coaches an element of simulation. Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? It's a real.
It was last season. He said that it's not something that he said it was like, oh, we've got to go out and like you have penalty shootout practice, we're all going to start tapping over people's legs. Yeah. But he's just said that there is I suppose the word you use is there's an art.
I was going to say, you don't want to say art, but that's the word, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And it's also a case of injury prevention as well. If you, as a player, are able to get out of a really awful tackle and you can land safely, that is, in a way, a dive. But the consequences are a lot worse if you don't manage to get out of the way. So it is, as we say, that context of, yes, a player could dive over another player's leg, but if contact's made, his leg's in a couple of pieces and he's out for 6 months.
I do honestly think, if you think back to probably the greatest English striker that we've had is arguably Shearer. He was absolutely brilliant at winning a free kick on the halfway, like long ball pumped up to him, he'd feel the contact from the centre half, he'd go down, he'd win a foul. That is the same as what we'd now class as diving. It's been done for a long time. I just think certain players, because Shearer's reputation was of typical English centre forward who was, strong, physical, he wasn't ever called a diver, but that's what he was doing in effect. He was feeling minimal contact and going down, and he was, Mark Hughes was pretty much the same. He would win free kick after free kick, and all it does is alleviate the pressure off the team. So, yeah, I struggle with the diving thing sometimes.
I think it's more like the act of when when supporters are watching players and they know a player just blatantly throws himself to the floor, or it's the Rivaldo corner flag incident at the World Cup in 2002. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? When there's a blatant cheating element. I think that's probably what people hate more than what you'd call buying a free kick, like you say, Liza Shearer would do, or a modern day Andy Carroll would do. But it's I think it's a side of the game that we'd all kind of hope would go, but it's hard to police and it's hard to prove as well.
Yeah, the other thing that comes from it, and when you cited Neymar in this, was how players are being brought up as well with their footballing educations. They're seeing referees on a pitch from, 8 or 7 or 8 years old. They've got referees who they know will protect them when it comes to a tackle. So that's where you'll see with the likes of Neymar, who's probably the first properly skilled player to really lean on the referee to help him get his decisions around there, compared to the old Brazilian style where they'll use their tricks to get around a player, and instead of leaving a leg to dangle and gain that advantage, they'd be able to do it with his skill, because you can tell that Neymar has got the ability to get round a man, but he'll prefer to leave the leg trailing and get the guy on a yellow card. Look at the likes of, say, Ronaldinho, who's only half a generation behind him. And instead of leaving a trailing leg, he just nutmegged the guy because he's better than him. And he'd never had that referee within his education of street football, compared to the likes of Neymar, who came through academies.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I'll bring Lana in to this debate as well. And I'm going to sort of segue into another question as well as this. So our good friend Max, I was trying to say your name right, Max Greichka, he also chimes in with the VAR debate. He says, how would you make VAR better, or what would you change? And also, do you like it so far this season? So, Lana, there's a rule in France, isn't there, about diving, that it gets you suspended. Yes. And it's the only league that's really kind of clamped down on it. Do you think that will get even more harsh when VAR comes in France? And what's your kind of views on VAR, what you've seen of it in particularly Serie A and Bundesliga are using it, aren't they, this season? And MLS have been heavily sort of using it as well. I think probably for me, Germany's the place I've seen it used best. But have you got a thought on how that could affect sort of football going forward, particularly when it comes in France when they've already got that rule in place?
Well, first of all, the whole diving question, my views on it is I love the rule. I also love how harshly they, put it down on, because it's like, example, Fekir dived last season to win Lyon a penalty, which Lacazette scored from, securing him 3 points. It resulted in Fekir being banned for 3 games, which might seem harsh, but it's only fair. And also another rule is when you injure a player, which results in being out for months, you get the equal amount of games suspended. Which that's one of my favorite things with the French league, is that they are so harsh with their penalties, but it's also worth it because you see less and less diving. I haven't seen any suspensions when it comes to diving lately, which is why I also enjoyed the fact that Neymar has joined PSG, because I feel that he's going to sit on the bench a lot this season. And regarding VAR, I like that it's been that it's come into play, mostly because then we don't have to listen to Serie A fans complaining about Juve getting all the decisions, which we've seen this season because we had 3 penalties against us. But I like it. It only takes 30 seconds, which is better than having players around you for 2 minutes complaining about whether it was a penalty or not. So I rather the ref take 30 seconds to go over the footage to see if it's a penalty, is it a goal, was it a hands, is it a yellow card, etc., etc. And I know people say it ruins the game, but having incorrect decisions ruins it more than having a ref step away for 30 seconds to make a call that will determine the fate of the game. Because I don't think it's ruined it. I think it will only improve the refereeing as well. So I hope that it comes to the Premier League because I see a lot of poor refereeing, especially a lot of the Arsenal games. And the fact that Lacazette's goal was ruled offside when it wasn't genuinely bothers me. It still bothers me.
And me.
Yeah. So it's those tiny details that will, it might not matter a lot now, but when it comes to the end of the season, that goal could have sent you into the Champions League.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Actually, I think you make some really good points there, and I'll get a sentence from the other two guys as well, just on VAR. Joel, are you a fan of it? What do you think?
I'm a fan of it in principle. I think it should only be used for offsides. I think anything else is just subjectivity. How many times do you watch the TV? Football on TV, and it goes to the studio and you have three ex-footballers talking about an incident and they can't agree on it. So all we're going to get is that replicated by a video ref who might have a different opinion to what we have at home. I don't think with a subjective decision like a tackle in the box, I don't think we're going to get a definitive answer. We're going to get another opinion for the referee to listen to. Whereas I think an offside or the ball over the line is crystal clear. I would like to see it stop at that point, or something absolutely ridiculous like a handball where it's blatant. But I think for stuff in the box, I'm not 100% fan of it. I think we might be underwhelmed with it and say, well, we're not actually getting a unanimous decision here and it's crystal clear, because we never do when it goes to the studio. And that's an indication for me that we're never all going to agree on football, because it's sometimes it is a game of opinions, and those decisions are based on opinion.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. Have you got a different view, Josh? What do you think? Because it's going to come in, I think it's Premier League first, isn't it, next year? And then eventually that will bleed down into the Championship and beyond. So is it, I suppose that's another argument, is it going to be more useful for certain league levels, i.e. would it be better in the Championship, for example, that style of play, or the Premier League, or is it better suited to the continent, or is that just a myth?
Am I right in thinking it's in one of the cup competitions this season? There's so many in England. I can't think if there is one.
Yeah, aren't they doing it in, is it the Checker Trade or one of the smaller cup competitions, isn't it? I think. Yeah,
it's one of the small ones is using it. And I can't remember which one. However, yes, I'd bring it in for, to be honest, any decision that has got a binary outcome, basically. So is it yes or no? The kind of things like free kick placements. So like Joel was talking about, was the tackle inside or outside the box? That's a critical factor when it comes to making a decision. And if a referee starts lining a free kick that's, a yard outside the box, then yes, of course he needs someone to be in his ear and say, sorry, mate, actually it's 2 yards the other way. That's actually a penalty. Those are the kinds of decisions that I'd want VAR to be used for, but not necessarily it being requested, just a whisper in the referee's ear. We don't need to know that decision or that discussion has occurred necessarily. It's only a case of when or whether or not we bring it to the managers and coaches and players to dictate when they want to use VAR in a kind of tennis style. So I think in cricket, you can use it whenever, there's no challenges, but in terms of tennis, they've got, I think it's 3 strikes they can use to make a call on it. But there is that worry that it could be used a bit like a timeout in American football.
Tactical,
exactly.
They've had it in rugby league for years, for as long as I can remember Super League being around. They've had a video referee, and that's only at the referee discretion. But the only thing to say on that is any contentious decision, he goes to the video referee. So
and I think
you get that because the referee is afraid to make a decision on his own, because he may as well go to the video referee to get absolute clarity. So that does, in some sense, slow the game down, because for every decision that's slightly contentious, it's to the video referee.
Yeah, you'd have to say that rugby's a little bit less, it's a free flowing, but it's a lot of set plays.
Yeah.
Basically. It's set play after set play rather than football, which can be very end to end without the ball necessarily going out of play, out of touch.
And teams counter-attacking as an actual style as well, like actually setting up to play at speed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
It's one that will run, isn't it? It's one that will run and run. It's a really good question, and I'm glad we got one on that because I've been wanting to talk about VAR a little bit. So it is a good question for Max to ask, and hopefully we did it a little bit of justice. We did have one other quick question from Dylan just before I move on to the last couple, which was, will Celtic win 10 in a row? Josh, how many have they got at the moment? Is it 5 they've done in a row or 6?
I think it's 6.
6. I'm just going to stick my neck out. I'm saying yes, 10 in a row is perfectly possible. I just can't see, like Joel said earlier, I can't see anyone even coming close to them at the moment. So straightforward answer to that one, Dylan. Yes, I think we can. The last couple, they all come from Jimmy, actually, and there's 3 left. So that's nice. So should get one each for you. So the first one, let's have a look. Why do you, or is it all one question? No, it's all one question, actually.
It's all one, but there is another question after that.
Is there? Is that from you, maybe?
No, it's from Pat.
Oh, okay.
But I've replied to it to make it more difficult.
Gotcha. Okay, so you can have that one last then. So, Jimmy's question then, it's a long one. So why do you think the top clubs are starting to lose their stranglehold on their given leagues? We saw Monaco win Liga last season, Juventus moderately favoured to finish second behind Napoli, which is obviously debatable, with the Milan clubs not far behind. Dortmund currently top the Bundesliga, with Bayern third, and the likes of Atletico and Sevilla seem to be rapidly closing the gap between Barca and Real. So let's start with Joel on that one. Why do you think that is the case? Is it that the top clubs are getting are they getting caught, as it were, or is it the fact that there's sort of less players for the big clubs to sign? Or again, is it a myth? Are the big clubs still way out in front, in your opinion, particularly in Spain?
Yes, to answer for Spain, I think we will see the gap. We touched on it earlier. The gap will continue to close in Spain due to the more equal distribution of the TV money. So therefore, teams have got more money to spend. They can buy a higher quality of player. I still would expect it to the league to be between Barca, Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. Probably Barca, Real Madrid and Atletico, I think, will be third. But that's largely due to the moving stadium, having a transfer ban. I think if they were start of next season, they'll be even closer because they'll have, Vitolo and Costa fit from the start of the season, etc., and build into a new stadium. I think for a number of reasons you can look at why, Real Madrid have started poor this season. Barcelona had a terrible summer transfer window, the most documented kind of transfer chase ever for a certain number of players. So I think we'll continue to see the gap to close, but that's purely because there's more money going to those teams. I can't really answer for the other leagues, but that's the perspective from Spain.
What about in France then, Lana? What do you think? Well, France and Italy, actually, you can take both. I mean, is there the gap in Italy? It does seem like it could be a more open Serie A season this season. But that said, Juve have sort of cranked into gear in recent weeks, particularly on Saturday, like we said, in the Derby. And then France, obviously, we've got this anomaly where we've got PSG and all their money. We've got Monaco frantically sort of trying to catch them. They've played very well this season, Monaco, to be fair, but then tonight I was just going to say they when it really mattered in the Champions League, they were beaten by Porto at home tonight 3-0. So is there even a title race in France to speak of, and what about the Italian side of things? Is there sort of a closing of the gap in either leagues, do you think, or is it just that there's one club, i.e. Juve and PSG, out in front, and then the other clubs are catching each other up?
I think in Italy, the gap is slowly closing, especially, with investors coming in, with Milan, with Inter, and as Joel said, more money for the TV, from the TVs to the clubs, especially if they do well in the Champions League and Europa League. Obviously, they'll get more money to invest. But in France, you basically have, Qatar versus France. And I think that gap is so far, and it's not going to be possible to close it unless you get other countries to basically come into France and invest in the clubs, which I just don't see it. mostly because I don't see someone like Lyon getting in a Chinese investor. I don't see the likes of Marseille doing it. Well, Marseille have, but the other clubs doing it. So the gap won't close. It will take a long time before anyone could compete money-wise with PSG. Only club in any way near doing so is Monaco. But even that, selling Mbappe was such a stupid move because it just showed that, okay, basically PSG owns the league. There's no point in giving everyone else a chance to compete in it. So before, you would say the same about Juve. But, as we mentioned, the gap has closed. You see other clubs getting more money with investors and everything. But I don't see that happening in France anytime soon.
No, I concur with that, and I suppose bringing it back to these shores, Josh. I suppose the Premier League, we all know. I mean, our listeners are fully aware of who the big guns are in the Premier League, and the fact that Joel's already touched on it. That this sort of idea that every club can beat each other. Well, yes, technically they can, but it very rarely happens that a little club beats a big club. But the Championship's probably a better example to use, in that we've got foreign investors in Championship clubs now, we've got foreign managers in Championship clubs, and living proof that when you look at the Championship table after some midweek games that were played tonight, you've got some big names down at the bottom, and you've got some what you'd call sort of lesser sides floating in amongst the top end. So is the Championship a good league to use as an example of where there has been a narrowing of the clubs?
Yeah, I think particularly this season, it's kind of narrowed itself out. I suppose that's the upside of comparing a league that sits between two others, so that you've got the fact that if a team is by far and away too good for the league, they've moved out of it by promotion, and if they're awful, they've dropped out of the bottom through relegation. So that's where you've got with the difference with the Premier League, I would say, is kind of, it's obviously going to be tighter at the top. In the Championship, generally, depending on who's dropped out of the Premier League. So the Premier League this season is quite weak near the bottom, personally. I mean, there's quite a few candidates for relegation, plus some more who've thrown themselves into the mix unwittingly. I think the likes of Crystal Palace, personally, a team that I thought would do all right this season. But it's a difficult thing to say that I know England's second tier is now surpassing a lot of Europe's top leagues in terms of popularity and arguably quality of the teams and players and managers that are down there. Look at Hull, you've got Leonard Slutsky, who was just hanging around England waiting for a job, couldn't get one in the top 20 teams, arguably, and was dropped into the Championship because the football culture, I think, for England is just by far and away greater than the other European teams. But it's a league that's definitely progressing very well. But it's very tight this season. I think Joel will attest to that because you're at the KCOM tonight, weren't you, Joel?
Yeah, falling.
Was it that bad, was it? Home defeat to Preston, was it?
Yeah. I know Slutsky was hanging around for a job, but he might be hanging around for a job to get him
hanging out the back of Crystal Palace somewhere or something at some point. Yeah,
Well, that's the thing about the Championship. It is one of those that there's teams that last season were struggling down the bottom and now high flying at the moment at the start of the season. A bit like Preston, Cardiff, who top the table at the moment, are another one who have just got a manager in and sustained that tenureship basically for about 12 months. So that kind of stability has allowed them to push up the table. I know Preston had Simon Grayson in charge for a long, long time, who really has given them a good basis to then get a manager who has similar attributes, but also likes to attack a little bit more in Alex Neil, which is why they're now sitting just outside the promotion places of their result tonight.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those leagues that I mean, Ross called it, didn't he, pre-season, as did yourself, saying it would be the league to watch this season if you hadn't had a dabble in before because of the close teams, and it's definitely been played out that way. So, yeah, very very good question that from Jimmy, and thank you to him for his contributions to this pod this evening. So thank you for Jimmy. Our final question then, before we wrap up this bizarre little special that we've thrown together. This one is back to Pat, our good friend over in the US, Pat Ormsby _XC. Simple question. It's a lovely way to finish off tonight's pod. What is it that you love about football, or why did you fall in love with football? It's a great question. And we could go on for hours, so we'll keep it to a fairly quick answer each. Joel, do you want to start us off? What made you fall in love with a beautiful game? You're a good example, seeing as you follow a team from abroad as well. So what was it that made you fall in love with the game?
I asked this the other day, I can't remember what answer I gave. I don't know, I find it really hard to put my finger on why. I think football becomes addictive. I don't know if that's because when you get, you kind of want that again, so then you hope that that happens again, and so then you continue watching for that feeling of winning. I just feel I can never put my finger on why I love football. I guess it's the element of competition. I guess it's the element of spectacle. All those things that go into when you go to a game of football, I guess. It's very hard to define why I love it, but it's something that I don't. Well, I know for certain that I'd just be lost if football was to stop existing, from tomorrow.
It would feel like an empty void, wouldn't it? Just like
it would just be, you can't comprehend it, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's the element. There's just something always going on, and I think we've now moved to the situation with football where, on the pitch it's so important, but the politics off it are important. But we're now all also addicted to, more than ever, to transfers. If you look at especially in each window, there's so many stories about transfers, and now transfers have become such a huge thing. Transfer deadline day is a day in the football calendar now, so it's almost like a different element to football as well, in that respect. So it's not only what happens on the pitch. I think we're also fascinated to what's going on off the pitch as well, which just adds a different dynamic to it completely. So, I can't specify why I love football, but all those components thrown together just make it something I couldn't live without, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a really hard one to sum up, but I think you've done well to come across that sort of side of the love you have for it. What about you, Lana? What made you sort of fall in love with the game? Because obviously you grew up abroad, so was it any different for you? Was there certain thing that made that passion stir inside?
Well, I'm country over club girl, so Zidane was the reason I fell in love with football in France, and from then on, unfortunately, I've been stuck with them, and just seeing the magic of Zinedine Zidane just made me fall in love with football. I think it's just amazing how a team of 11 individuals can have you so hooked to them for 90 minutes, and the fact that if they lose, you're miserable until the next game, and if they win, it's like the happiest feeling in the world. And it's kind of scary also at the same time how they can affect your mood, both in a good and a bad way, because you're in such a high when you win and you're on an all-time low when you lose, especially for me, seeing how I've gone to watch them lose the World Cup final to a Euro final, and I hate them, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to support any of the national team.
Yeah, I think you sum up for me as well. It's that emotion of being so high and so low, and it can literally affect your whole weekend if your club goes down to heavy defeat. See Arsenal Liverpool recently for my best example of that. And what about yourself, Josh? I mean, is there a single sort of thing about the game itself that you love? I mean, you play as well as do I, or sort of manage play at a lower level. So is there something that stirs the passion for you, or is it all about just getting behind the team you follow?
I think it depends of how you were initially introduced to football as well. I have to check with Pat, but I'd imagine coming from a country that doesn't have the same football culture as England. I don't remember when I first kicked a football, but let's probably say it was just shortly after I started walking. So football has always been a part of my life. I've always loved playing. So I think that's where it's come into it. And then watching comes from how you improve your own game. But I think, as Joel has gone to say, it's kind of socially how football just holds no prejudice against if you're rich or poor, black or white. It doesn't matter. You can pick up, you can improvise. It's such a simple game, but with so many different ways of playing it. So you can see, in kids kicking in the street, you can be playing with a football, you could be playing with a Coke can. There's always a little game that you can break out, and it's just a universal language. And I think it's the simplicity, but also the complexness with how you can play it that just makes it just the game that we all enjoy today.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, there's not a lot I can add to all of your sort of descriptions there. I mean, I think for me, it is the old fashioned words like the passion, the emotion, the sort of the highs, the lows. But I got in quite late. I was one of those weird people that didn't really like football growing up, and then I supported Arsenal for as long as I can remember. I mean, I was very, very young, and I grew up in and around sort of the old Highbury, so I was very close to the club I love. But I wasn't sort of passionate fan when I started supporting them. I just kind of followed them because the family went, and then all of a sudden, I think it was sort of I suppose 8, 9 years of age onwards to the teenage years. That's when it really kicked in, the passion for me, and just sort of made me really engage with the club I loved and really sort of feel all the goods and all the bads. And again, massive cliche, but I always watch the film Fever Pitch, and I see myself in those characters, and that is just to a T, where you just forget all about life and all about the problems you've got and all about all the crap you've got to go through, and you just engage in a game of football. And when you're, I guess, a little bit like us, where you can appreciate football from all different countries, all different players, all different teams, as well as having a passion for a team that you really follow, to your very core, I think that opens your mind up a lot more. And you could learn more about the game rather than just being, I support Arsenal, or I support Barcelona, or I support Juve. There's more to the game than just the one team you support. And I think if you learn more about the game, that kind of gives you more of an appreciation for the club you actually follow. So, I think that's a really, really good question. Really, really good question. And a good way to finish there, Pat. So thank you very much for that. There we go. That will bring us to a close then for this. I almost feel like I'm cheating the listeners by saying it's a special, because it was very hastily thrown together, as Josh will testify, as we talked about it late last night. We hope you've enjoyed it. We do apologise genuinely for the mix-up this week, and as 2 audio flubs in one season. But as Ross brilliantly put it, if you could get through what we put together at the end of last season, then you can get through anything. So we do appreciate you all tuning in, and hopefully, all being well, normal service will be resumed next week. We're also hoping to, moving forward, get a regular sort of time or day together to record. We appreciate it's been a bit all over the shop this year, but with various members of ourselves, myself, Joel and John in particular, have been working a lot. And obviously, Josh, you were in Canada for a little while, weren't you? And we've obviously had a couple of people move on as well, so it's all been a little bit hectic this season. But hopefully in the coming weeks we will be back to a sort of a regular time slot, and we will continue to cover the European leagues as well as the English games as per request of you the lovely listeners. So thank you all very much. Just some housekeeping before we leave you. As we mentioned at the start of the show, if you do like the show and you want to contribute to us to help us sort of pay for our equipment and all the things that we have to do to keep the show on the road, then we do really, really appreciate it on our GoFundMe page, gofundme.com/the FH podcast. Just to give a name check to a few of you lovely people that have donated us some money. We've mentioned a few of these already, but Pete Kennelly, Adam Manzor, Shay Ginley, Tom Bates, Max Krochika, Ariane Hedari and Mitch Rapach have all donated to us, various different amounts, but all really sizable amounts. So thank you all very, very much. We really appreciate it. We've got a target of raising £200. We've raised 100 already, so we're halfway there. And so you know, this isn't to pay for Joel to watch Hull, and it's not to pay for Josh to go to Canada. I promise. These things are to cover things like SoundCloud, where we pay per year. We also pay our website hosting fees. We also pay for the equipment that we use as well. So it all goes to a good cause. I promise you, we're not having a lovely jolly up on it. So thank you very, very much for those who have contributed. And if you want to contribute, we would very much appreciate it. And we will, of course, give you a shout out on next week's pod. Right, as I will always do before I close the show, I'll give our guests the opportunity to plug themselves, if you pardon the expression, and any final thoughts. So, Joel, nice to have you back. Where can people find you, and anything you want to say? Feel free if you want to drop a game for people to watch in Spain next week, since we haven't done our regular show.
Yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at Joel Melwar, so it's at JoelMeloir. And game to watch in Spain, I'm going to go for Espanyol at the Bernabeu, because Madrid have not won at the Bernabeu yet. Drawn 2 and lost 1, so praying that continues again at the weekend. So that would be my one to look out for.
Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, super. And I say nice to have you back. And Lana, our newbie, happy to have you joining the team. Obviously, we'll fit you in around your work as well. But where can people find you? And have you got a game that you fancy picking out, either in Italy or France, to watch next week?
Well, I'm back on Twitter under a new handle. It's Cocolito. So if you have missed my rants, feel free to follow me. I haven't checked the fixture list, actually. I think it was a certain Roma game this Saturday, which was playing.
Yes, we looked it up, didn't we, when we were recording last night? Roma, isn't it Roma? Is it Roma Juve this weekend, or have I got that horribly wrong?
It's Roma Milan on Sunday.
Of course, on Sunday. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes,
5 o'clock England time.
Good, and that's probably the one to watch as far as that goes. And I think was it on Sunday that we picked out a game in Liga as well? Monaco Marseille, isn't it, this weekend? Or have I just made that up?
Might be correct. No, it's
Nice Marseille. Sorry, yes, I've thrown the wrong clubs together. Yeah, Nice Marseille is probably the game from France on the Sunday night to watch as well. Okay, good stuff. Nice to have you aboard. And finally, Josh, where can people find you, and what will you be watching this weekend, I wonder?
So you can catch me on Twitter at bnjoshed. Mostly talking about NFL at the moment, but that'll stop happening once the Rams resume normal service and start losing games. But games to look out for. Actually, if you're quick, it's technically today. Sheffield United play Wolverhampton Wanderers at 7:45 in the Championship. That's a game to have a look at. Otherwise, from the weekend proper fixtures, let's have another one from the Championship. I will go with Cardiff City versus Derby County. That'll be another game to have a look at. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff, so if you're internationally based, you'll probably be able to pick up a stream of that.
Got a couple of good ones in the Premier League as well, haven't we, this weekend? Liverpool, Newcastle on Sunday, Chelsea, Man City on Saturday. And West Ham, Swansea is... you wouldn't think that would be a big game, but given both clubs' sort of starts of the season, that's suddenly got quite a lot of eyes on it, as probably will have Manchester United, Crystal Palace. Will Crystal Palace score a goal? That is the big question. I doubt it.
They managed to put non-league Bromley to the sword in a behind closed doors friendly today, which resulted in them winning 2-1.
Well, Wonders will never cease.
Watch out, Jose.
I wonder if our friend, I wonder if Harry was at that game. Our friend Harry Hinton.
I'll ask the question.
Report back. He's because he is a PA correspondent for Bromley FC. So there you go. So was he there? And did he get a T-shirt, much like John Jensen, who got 1 goal for Arsenal? Did he get a T-shirt saying "I was there when Palace scored"? That's the big question we need to ask him. So yes, super. Okay, we will leave it there then. As I say, normal service, all being well. Technology, assuming the technology works, we'll be back to normal next week, and we will hopefully have all the regular slots back in place. And just a quick plug, we are looking to do another MLS special with the aforementioned Jimmy and Pat soon as well. So if you're a fan of US soccer, do tune in, because we'll be covering just before the playoffs or just after. We're not quite sure which, but we will be doing that soon. So big thanks to you all once again for tuning in. Thank you for being patient with us. This podcast should be released on the Wednesday, so you've got plenty of games to watch in the Champions League and the Europa League this week still, and of course the Championship in midweek. And please do look forward to your football next weekend. On behalf of Josh and Joel and Lana, thank you very much for listening. Keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. Thanks for bearing with us. We'll be back next week.